SCP-378 is sapient, but it by no means understands the significance of its actions. With a little bit of persuasion, David Lockheed might yet ascend from petty paper pusher for the ASCI, right where the Foundation most needs a puppet. And if I'm not mistaken, Spicy Crust Pizza could always do with a second franchise. Welcome back, man. Been a while. I've just been trying to survive this week, but I have, and we're here at the end of it, at the recap show. This is 2019, week 24 on SCP Cafe. I'm your host, Blue Soul SCP Wiki moderator, chat operator, subreddit moderator, author, loving husband, dog petter, Cologne aficionado, Tottenham Hotspur supporter, purveyor of truths. I didn't lie to you people. I told you there was a contest coming. They hated me because I spoke the truth. I was right. It's here. The collaboration contest. I'm so in love with this concept. So here's what we've got. You have to team up with a partner to produce 2 articles about 2 GOIs in the Foundation universe teaming up. So you're collaborating with somebody to produce 2 pieces about 2 factions. The rules for what qualifies as a GOI are actually highly flexible. There are quite a few people that are talking about things that have only appeared once or twice. They have to have at least appeared before this contest, but that's honestly very close to the extent of it. This began on Monday. We opened the brainstorming period. You find your partner, start coming up with ideas, start writing. And almost immediately people jumped in, started coming up with teams, and already getting going. We have until June 24th. At that point, June 24th, midnight EST, you can submit your works. And you have 1 week to submit pieces. From the 24th to the 1st, at that point, you can no longer post, and you may begin, if you haven't already, the voting on all the stuff that's out and about. That will continue for 2 weeks until July 15th, at which point the voting period is over, and we will go with the 2 highest rated pieces that each team has come up with, as you can write more than 2 articles for the purpose of this contest. And on July 16th, the winners will be announced. If you are interested in this, you need to go to scp-wiki.net. The collaboration contest is front and center, right smack middle of the page. The collaboration contest has just begun. Now, looking through the list of already established teams for this, it is a huge amount of talent already committing to partners and doing this. A couple that caught my eye. First ones in were DJ Cactus and Wodenaz. We also have a team with Kindly Turtle Clem and Floppy Phoenix, Stormbreath and Stormfallen, Modern Erasmus, and Nat Voltaic, formerly 9volt. A couple of up-and-coming authors in Nameless Mediocre and The Blue Hour. Just a ton of talent already committing to this. Dr. Chandra and Lord Stonefish in a team, Ip and Uncle Nicolini, Wirillium and Rock Teeth Moth Eyes. If I was a betting man, that is a super good team. Western and Henzoid, little SCP declassified action there. Just a ton of people. Oh, and I'm in this list. This is actually going to be my first contest I have ever entered in. I am teaming up with AIS Mallard. We are Team Have You Tried Restarting It? I'm really excited about this. We're already tossing ideas around, and the SCP Cafe chat is a great place to jump in and just kind of see this creative process go. We've been doing pretty much all of it publicly in there, and I'm excited. This is one of these where, as I've done the podcast so much, it's been stirring that creative spirit, and really making me want to write more. I've come up with a couple of J ideas that I've been already writing, and this is going to be something fun. Now, if you're really, really into the podcast, you might say, well, wait a minute. You said Making a Monster was going to be your first main lister in 6 years. Well, maybe. It's possible that I don't get that idea out before we do this contest. And, hopefully that doesn't disappoint anybody too much. It will be a different sort of thing, as it is all coming from more of a solo aspect. And as much as anything of writing skips is a solo endeavor, I think it's always collaborative, just by the nature of you see other works, you're inspired by them, you pull things in from around you and build on the conventions that already exist and have been perfected by the people that came before you. So CollabCon is here. I told you so. I also told you a potential podcast guest. That also came true. I basically, the day after recording the Week 23 show, we firmed up a date and time. Actually, we got the date set like an hour after I finished recording the show. It's like, hey, let's do it tomorrow. I said, okay. So I am available now on the American Slacker podcast. That's aspodcast.com. Now, I'm going to give an apology here, both to Matt and Jesse, the hosts of American Slacker, and to you cafe listeners, because the audio quality in the podcast episode on American Slacker started out really solid, but apparently it sounded fine on my end. It apparently did not sound that way on the other end, and they were too gracious to let me know I sounded like a robot, like all distorted and laggy, like I should be being recorded by the FBI making demands for the return of the president's daughter. It's kind of gnarly, actually, but I really couldn't do anything about it, so I apologize. The audio quality isn't up to the standards I would really like, but we do talk almost exclusively about the Foundation and talk a little bit about Cafe, but mostly about the wiki. And it was fun. They were both super into SCP, but didn't have a huge background in it, or know some of the basics, some of the big names and numbers, if you will. And had a lot of fun recording it. And I know they do listen to Cafe, which is cool. So I'm going to digress here for a minute. I have a joke skip idea, and I promise this is going somewhere. I have this idea of it's an anomalous shed. It's at a house in, let's say, Indiana, and the Foundation opens the shed and they find a bunch of random items. They find a bicycle, they find a lawnmower, they find a gas can, they find a photo album, and in the photo album there's pictures of an old woman and some small children, and they go back a few days later to continue sort of archiving and inventorying the contents of this shed, and they find that a lock has been put on the shed, and obviously we're not supposed to know what lies within this shed, and we bust the lock, and we keep archiving, and we find more things. We find a pair of old flip-flops, and we find a diary, and there's the diary recounts a very boring summer in Indiana, as summers in Indiana tend to be. And we go back a few days later, and now the shed's got a chain on it as well as a lock, and we go to break the chain and break the lock, and an unidentified man comes out and says, "Why the fuck do you guys keep breaking into my shed? I'm calling the fucking police." And the punchline here is that we're just burglarizing some poor bastard shed. It's not anomalous at all. We're just so up our own ass that we're convinced that all this this totally mundane shed is actually spooky and anomalous. And so where I'm going with that is I would actually love to bring these guys on from American Slacker. I'd love to do some voice work with them, and just have them do sort of an interview thing. Maybe have one of them be the homeowner, have him be, a Foundation researcher that's on the scene as we're basically burglarizing this fucking guy. So that's my pitch. I want to get them involved because they were awesome. Had a lot of great questions and a lot of stuff that we talked about off air that it just showed me they were really really into this genuinely, and their enthusiasm was really appreciated, and I thought it made for a really fun show. So check it out. It's American Slacker Podcast. That's aspodcast.com. So as I said earlier, I was really just trying to survive this week. This week was super crazy busy. This has been sort of the culmination in my day job of the last 4 months or so of work. It was all building up to this week, and actually today specifically. And the hard work paid off. I'm off the hook. I'm free. And it actually went better than I expected. Everything went really well. And that means I should have a little bit of free time now. I should actually be able to record some of this bonus content that I've been wanting to do. So this should mark the resumption of some regularly scheduled activities. And one thing that I might do, having found a little bit of Reddit history. So as it turns out, I did a thing in 2013 towards the later, like the second 30, there's like week 42, somewhere like that. I did this thing where every week I was posting the top 5 highest rated articles of the week. I was doing it on a weekly basis. I kept this up for a while, actually. And it's funny how here we are, almost 6 years later, doing the same thing. It's kind of crazy, and it got me thinking what I might do, and I'm curious to know people's thoughts on this, is to go and do I don't have a name for it, but I might let's call it Recap Rewind, and it would be the best articles or the highest rated articles from this week 5 years ago. Hell, now it could be 10 years ago, and just see, look at these works through fresh eyes, and maybe it might be the first work of a now established author. I think it could be fun, but I'm curious to know what people think about it. So let me know your thoughts on that. I'm intrigued by the idea, but I'm intrigued by a lot of ideas right now. Even with the newfound free time, I don't think I'll be able to do everything, but I am going to get some extra content out there, and that means as well some additional new designs, new merchandise, and that sort of stuff on the cafe store as well. Now, all that said, we're going to get into it. This was another very busy week, actually, and this was a normal 7-day week for week 24. Had 20 skips surviving by selection day, and 19 of the 20 were in scope. So I got through about 2/3 of it, and it started turning into a bloodbath. So I apologize if yours did not make the cut, or if you wanted to see something in particular get discussed. This was a really difficult week, and that's a good problem to have. That means the works are really high quality consistently. More than just 5 good works a week is an awesome problem to be given. So I do have that narrowed down to 5 and 1 long boy, including a Series 1 rewrite, which I alluded to at the open of the show. So we're going to get started. SCP-4229, titled Mother's Gift by Dance. This piece has an object class of Euclid and an image of a red, it's a standing height sort of mailbox, typical of the sort you would find in England, in use by the Royal Mail. It's a red mailbox with an open slot, and a few sets of procedures here. In particular, the mail cavity, I guess the slot where you would put the mail in, is to be basically held open at all times. We are having concerns about the continued containment of it, so we are planning to relocate this object to Site 103. Staff are to retrieve instances of -1 each day for testing and storage, but testing and is struck through, so now just storage. We are to log every instance of -1 for DNA and any defining marks or tattoos, which is an odd sort of thing because here I thought we might be talking about the mail. And then it's to be stored in containment freezer 4229 on level 8 of Site 76. And personnel stationed on this skip will be tested weekly for naturally occurring blood-based pathogens. So, getting into the description here, it is described as a mailbox, 1 meter in height, 25 centimeters in width, 1 meter in depth, all fairly standard stuff for one of these mailboxes. Interestingly, a root system resembling that of an oak tree extends 2 meters from the base of the skip into the soil. Any attempts at excavating it causes the root system to develop at a rapid rate until it roots in suitable ground. We first discovered this skip in 1896, emerged from a street corner in southeast London, fracturing multiple pavement blocks, and when examined, we found inside a single instance of -1, which are described as packages manifesting within the mail cavity of this mailbox at statistically random intervals. -1 instances will manifest regardless of whether the cavity is empty, but this can result in eruptions of pressurized flesh if left closed. Gross. So here's an interesting thing. We almost put the cart before the horse here because you can assume that by what it just said, but it doesn't come out and say it until a little bit further down. It is that the -1 instances are made of flesh, and apparently if we don't hold the mail slot open, the opening of it later will result in sort of a pressurized eruption of flesh. That's gross. So in addition, epidermal contact with ruptured packages results in an above-average infection rate for HIV, hepatitis A, tuberculosis, and a variety of other blood pathogens. These -1, and we have one small adjustment here. This is instances of SCP-4229. This should be of -1. That's an easy fix. I may just fix that myself. They're uniformly square and possess a seamless encasement of human flesh. Packages register at a constant 37 degrees centigrade, which is body temp, and preserve without decomposition until the flesh is penetrated. So one consideration there is we do stick them in a freezer, even though we acknowledge here that it will sort of preserve itself just fine, regardless of being in a freezer. So just an interesting little thing here. I'm not sure if that is what the message is supposed to be, but it's a little confusing in that regard. Anyway, so inside these packages, these flesh meaty packages, are pieces of axle, shards of heavy transmission machinery, and other components associated with common aircraft. Up in the corner of these meat packages is a rectangular abrasion that looks like a stamp. The center has an address etched in cursive. It says, "To home, love, mom." And the reverse side of it is inscribed with a unique message. It has a similar sort of handwriting look to it. We have a passage of note that's entirely struck through, and it says, "The source of these packages is currently unknown." I'm going to come back to this. It then goes on to give a table of the different engravings that they found, and these are apparently highlights. So there's packages and the message and the recovery date, and these go anywhere from 1896 up to the year 2015, and the quotes are along the same lines of I'll give you the top one here. "My beloved child, how did you get here so far from home? Take care of yourself, darling. Wishing you best, Mom." And as they go on, they get more and more insistent to please stay home, and they always say, and they're always from Mom. but stay home. You don't know what you're doing. Keep your feet where they belong. Why do you desire so to go to places you were never meant to be? And finally, it says, you've polluted your opportunity. You are incapable of shouldering the responsibility of my gift. If you feel the right to my space, I have the same to yours. And from here, we go to a little note at the bottom that says, note, Dr. K. Audlin merged this file, and that's in blue. You have a collapse hold that says load merged file. And when you do, we now have a skip within a skip. This is a new entry with an object class of Keter, and the item number went from SCP Black Box to SCP 4229, which is our same skip number, -2. So we have new procedures here. MTF Kappa 20 Falcon Watchers is tracking -2 by land and sea to log any human-flown aircraft that comes in contact with the -2. For the sake of clarity and observations, Kappa 20 will keep a distance of no less than 3 kilometers from -2. Airplanes are to be prevented from entering it whenever it is cost-effective to do so. This is actually a revision from my first read of it, which I was going to take to task a little bit, where we were being far more passive and just letting planes fly into -2 and going, whoa, that sucks for them. So -2 is described as a cumulonimbus cloud with no definite shape, reaching up to 9 kilometers in height and 5 kilometers in width. No human-flown aircraft coming into contact with the -2 has yet been recovered, and per test 1, no direct signals can be transmitted from within the cloud. And we have another struck-through bit here that says, investigations into what occurs beyond the perimeter of SCP Black Box are ongoing. So we're leaning on this trope a little bit of strike-throughs to give a bit of exposition that we thought or suspected this in the past and now we don't. The description goes on to say that close proximity of somebody to -2, this meaning less than 3 kilometers, has demonstrated a mild mimetic effect. Since observation began, Kappa 20 members have increasingly expressed concerns about the Foundation's effect on the environment, and in one instance destroying a Foundation naval vessel beyond repair for, and I quote, causing harm to Mother. We have a footnote here that says, see case log 4229-2, interrogation of former Commander Wilson Quarry. Our doctor made the connection between this black box skip and 4229 in 2017 when U.S. Flight 52 came into contact with it. The roster on flight indicated 100% of the passengers had dates of birth that corresponded to recovery dates of -1 instances, the meat packages, and further investigation then revealed the DNA from these passengers were a genetic match for their respective packages. So that's how we come up with this merged file. And we have an addendum, and it is the aforementioned interrogation of a former commander. This commander destroyed a naval vessel, and we are basically holding a bit of an inquest as to what the hell happened. And Quarry, for his part, is not remotely apologetic about it. In fact, he says it's not going to run anymore. Good riddance. It was an old ship. It needed to go anyway. I'm glad my boys took that thing apart. And this is fairly tense from the beginning. Corey says, don't you dare. This isn't one of your mind control beanie babies you can keep in a locker. I woke up. Nothing changed to me. I just got closer to the truth. Our doctor responds, the truth was worth millions of dollars in damage? He responds that it was just another insult to Mother, and that she can feel that no matter where we are. And our doctor asks, this is your mother? And he responds, no, our mother. And the doctor says, this cost you everything, Wilson. Why on earth would you? And he cuts him off. Says, Earth is the gift beneath my feet. That wasn't enough, though, was it? We had to have more. Then we go up there? You wouldn't understand. None of you do. You just care about that fucking boat. And so the doctor asks the pertinent question. Said, so, Mother, she's in the cloud? And there's silence. And Quarry says, remind me again, what's your mission? The doctor says, with all due respect, former commander, not only did you oversee the destruction of Foundation property, you also failed your primary objective. And Quarry says, I signed up to protect. What's your job? You're gonna, what, secure her? You try getting close enough to contain her and tell me how you'd do that. And the doctor says, that was your assignment. And Quarry says, well, I can't do shit for you there. What do you think is going to happen when you poison the thing that gave you life? You're not getting it. If you're going to charge me, charge me. Until then, put me back in my goddamn cell. And we end the log there, and there's a notice at the end of this that says, following the recovery of the most recent package, the one that said you've polluted your opportunity, you're incapable of shouldering the responsibility of my gift, blah, blah, blah. The quantity of instances of -1 increased by 450%. Investigations into potential methods of mitigating a mass consumption event are ongoing. End article. So this is an interesting piece. It is interesting in what it does and what it does not do. We have a couple of instances where I think the work assumes too much of the reader. In particular, the thing I said I was going to come back to, the struck-through passage that says the source of these packages is currently unknown. Even by this work, it's still unknown. The only real thing we have is this cloud makes people crazy and destroys shit. We've got some connections here to potentially a person of interest called Mother. And I'm saying this from an objective scientific foundation sort of perspective, which is that we may have a guess, but we don't really make enough of a direct reference to, we need to find out what Mother is. We need to get in and see. I know, like, given that we've got 120 years of experience with this skip, and this is as far as we've gone as far as trying to explore it. I find it stretches the credulity just a little too much. Be that as it may, that no direct signals can be transmitted from within the cloud, if that's supposed to be the reasoning as to why we haven't done any exploration logs, we wouldn't have to. You could send a drone, be it a little guy or a big fella, given the size of this cloud of up to 9 kilometers tall and 5 kilometers wide. You could send a full-on Predator drone into that thing. That's going to have plenty of cameras, all with onboard storage that could see what it sees, and even if you did, you could fly a human in there with it to see what happens. I think that is certainly something that the Foundation would attempt, and we don't do that, despite having 100+ years to do it. Or maybe it's just a question of ambiguous wording. The source of these packages is currently unknown. Okay, the source, to some extent, might be people, or specific people that flew into this cloud, but we don't explain where this flesh came from. Are they missing a nice letter-sized chunk out of them? If so, then the source is known. If not, then we don't really still fully understand the mechanics behind it, nor do we know the sender. And that's the bigger thing, is we can make a guess that Mother is seeing people flying, polluting the air, and finding ways, as well as it can, as Mother Nature, to combat this, to combat the pollution. And it's doing so through viruses, through bloodborne pathogens, through all of the ways that the planet might find ways to protect itself. And this is actually something that George Carlin talked about in a stand-up special back in 1992 called Jammin' in New York. It was one of my favorites of his, and he talked about, and he actually came to the same sort of conclusions. And I've talked with Damps on a pretty regular basis in 19. This was just sort of convergent ideas here that the planet, if it needed to get rid of humanity, how would it go about it? Well, maybe, attacking the immune system, and it's a great bit. You can find it on YouTube, and it tells a good story, but the strike throughs here, I think, assume too much of the reader's ability to process it and not enough coming out and saying it. And I think you need to either go one way or another. If we are to be sort of congratulated for understanding it, then I think whatever's struck through here that's sort of a leading sort of sentence can be removed entirely. If we want to come out and tell people, then let's come out and tell people. This halfway business, I think it doesn't buy the work anything, and it does sort of give you pause. You're like, what does that mean? We don't actually go back and answer that question later. So that said, that's a fairly minor fix, and the core concept is good, and it's not. I've seen the separate pieces, parts of this, but not put together in this way. Particularly the business with merging the files. That's sort of a new format that I haven't quite seen with this introducing of new text in blue, and this does a good job of like, well, this is what we did know about it, and now this is what the conclusion that we've come to with having made the connection. The dialogue, the ending it here on this inquest of the former commander is okay. It's not too outright bad, but the one thing that I note here is that we sort of go back once we're done with this and say, hey, remember that last log that we had? We don't actually make the connection of why it's relevant to do it right at the end, and I don't see anything in here that would give a date to really bear that out either. So it could be that we have just added this on very recently, but we strike through this document on a regular basis. So adding the notice at the very end is kind of strange as well, that we might not just insert this in line where it makes sense. And in fact, yes, doing the notice at the end does give a little bit of rising action, maybe a cliffhanger of sorts, but I don't know. I don't know if it's enough. I don't know if it's enough of an ending to make it your final little passage here. But at the same time, off the top of my head, I don't have a better idea for doing it either. The work's fine. This is still a +1. It is, I think, a few adjustments away from being a really great piece, but this, for being a first-timer piece, is really well done. They've got the tone down really well. I don't have any gripes with the tone throughout this. So no, great first effort. And I think with a little bit of work and maybe some extra thought put into this build up of the final third and the ending here, I think it could be a really great piece. +1 all the same. Moving on, SCP-4182, titled There Is No Site 5 by the Great Hippo. Now, this piece is, it immediately looks to be quite short. We have an object class of Keter, and what looks to be, I think the idea here is that this is supposed to be a placeholder image of the Foundation logo, black on dark gray in a square, and the caption reads, invalid file /directory cam-5.og, which is it's an open format that can be audio, it can be video. We have minimal procedures. A Foundation-operated bot is to review our servers for files affected by 4182. The files are to be isolated and reported to the on-duty sysadmin for review and sterilization, and personnel are to be reminded there is no Site 5. Interesting. So the skip is described as a phenomenon by which internal Foundation documents are periodically altered to include references to Site 5. The mechanism by which this occurs has not yet been understood. Depictions of Site 5 are inconsistent, but typically describe it as a man-made island constructed to store hazardous materials, specifically anomalous waste. Since its discovery in 2018, 4182's rate of occurrence has been increasing exponentially. And we go from this to internal server error. This is apparently HTTP code 525. Now, here's the thing. When you, I'll come back to this. Basically, the server encountered an unexpected condition which prevented it from fulfilling the request. And what we have below this is a stack trace from a Python script, which apparently the Foundation runs on Python. Interesting. Our file not found error indicates no such file or directory, cam-5.og. The issue I have with this is that 525 internal server error, 500 codes are internal server errors. 525 already exists. It's that your SSL handshake has failed. So that doesn't drive with the error here. I don't see a good reason in the work not to just use a 404 error, which people are more familiar with anyway. Yeah, I'm that nerd enough. Anyway, there's a thing at the bottom that says, note, this document has encountered an unexpected condition. Click here to restore the previous version or contact your server's administrator. And this is jdavis at scp.foundation.int. Hippo was listening to this podcast, I suppose, and did my suggested naming convention here. For more details. So when you click here, this is doing what tech calls the list pages thing, the offset thing. And what this does is it gives an offset page within the scope of SCP-4182. So it's an entirely new page, and it exists within the scope of SCP-4182 as a document, but this is in universe supposed to be a previous version of the file. In fact, this one is from it's from 7/11/2015. Is that November 7th? Is it July 11th? Fucking might be. You tell me. No way of telling. This again says to contact your server's administrator, Jay Davis, for more details. Now, this is a Euclid class entry, and there's a picture. It's a man-made island. It says SCP-4182 as the caption. So we have a couple of procedures here. Personnel are working with the Japanese Maritime Self-Defense Force and other naval and aeronautic authorities to enforce a 10-kilometer exclusion zone around the skip, and access is strictly prohibited. And then we also have the same thing we had earlier. A Foundation-operated bot is to review internal servers for files affected by 4182. The files are isolated and reported to the sysadmin, blah, blah, blah. There is no Site 5. So 4182 in this revision is described as a 16-acre artificial island located 75 kilometers south of Ipponsugi, Japan, and although no record of its construction exists, its configuration suggests it was built as a waste containment facility at some point in the early 20th century. Foundation documents occasionally identify this location as a non-existent site, Site 5. All of 4182 structures were found sealed with reinforced acrylic plating. No further attempt to remove these plates or examine the interior of 4182 structures is to be made. Since its discovery in 2014, 4182's rate of occurrence has been increasing dramatically. So we also, again, have this invalid file/directory cam5.og. And then we again have this 525 internal server error, and again, a previous offset we can click. So this previous version is from 2002. This is from 15/7/2002, so it is July 15th. This one is level 3 classified. We have an image again. It's a man-made island. This time, the island is far larger. It takes up far more of this image, which I like as a cool effect. Like, we're zooming in on it. We're getting closer to understanding what it is. I actually really like this as a narrative element. The island has, like, the picture here has, like, looks like a slight radial blur given to it, so it's a little fuzzy around the edges and a little sharper in the center. We have our procedures now say that we're to work with the Japanese Maritime Self-Defense Force to enforce a 25-kilometer exclusion zone. It used to be 10. All entrances and windows that provide access to 4182's interior have been welded shut. via steel reinforced acrylic paneling coated in a graded Z laminate. Access is strictly prohibited. Then we have our same thing. Foundation operated bots to review servers for files affected by 4182. Personnel are to be reminded there is no Site 5. The description, the first two paragraphs are identical. It's an artificial island. Foundation documents will identify it as a non-existent site. We additionally have several of 4182's now sealed structures contained stairwells plugged with concrete. Excavations of these stairwells led to the discovery of a massive subterranean complex located beneath SCP-4182 containing a black box, black box, black box, black box. No further excavations are to be made. Uh-oh. Since its discovery in 2001, 4182's rate of occurrence has been increasing significantly. We have our same missing file, cam5.org, our same internal server error, and our same offset click here, and our same jdavis sysadmin. So this iteration is from 1992. This is a much clearer image. It's still blurry, but you can see more of the island here. This is an object class of Keter, which it's interesting. This keeps bouncing back and forth as we're apparently discovering this skip over and over. So this iteration's procedures include a 50-kilometer exclusion zone around 4182. All stairwells leading to 4182's subcomplex are to be sealed with approximately 2 meters of concrete composite, a formulation of cement, water, and heavyweight aggregates that provide additional radiation shielding reinforced with steel. And then we have our bot reviewing internal servers for alterations made by personnel affected by 4182. They're to be reminded. Oh, and this is actually a little bit different. There's a slight adjustment here, and there could maybe do with a bit of highlighting this change, because previously it said we're watching for files that have been changed. Now it says we're reviewing servers for alterations made by personnel affected by 4182. These personnel are to be isolated and reported to on-duty Foundation agents for review and sterilization. Personnel are to be reminded there is no Site 5. It's a little more intimidating, a little more high stakes there, that we're actually going after the people themselves. So again, so this one's interesting. The description, we know in new revisions where this thing is. In this revision, we've black boxed how many kilometers away and in what direction and of what location. And personnel affected by 4182 will descend one of several stairwells throughout the facility, proceeding into a massive subterranean complex that contains, and there's 7 or 8, like a full sentence worth of black boxes in here. Despite extensive seismological and radiometric surveys, the depth of this subcomplex has yet to be determined, but is in excess of several kilometers. In 1989, a medical examination of several hundred bodies recovered from 4182 was conducted. In approximately 75% of cases, the internal morphology showed minor to severe deviations from topographical norms, typically concentrated in the central nervous system. The most common cause of death was intracerebral hemorrhaging brought on by the rapid onset of liquefactive necrosis inside the brain. No further examinations are to be made. Since its discovery in 1986, 4182's rate of occurrence has been increasing. Now, what are we missing? Or rather, what are we not missing? What we're not missing this time is cam-5.org. It exists, and it's visible in this revision. And what we have, it says Cam5, it's meant to be a video feed, and it says, as the caption, Cam5 live footage. And it is a pile in black and white of human skulls. I'm sorry, actually just full-on human skeletons. There's a couple of skulls that are very distinct, and they immediately catch your eye. One of them in the bottom left that, is very much visible and still attached to the body. One above it, sort of in the top left third of it, where it's the skull is sort of back on its neck and its jaws hanging agape. It's really gnarly. This is really, really good imagery. Now, we have another iteration here. We go into offset 4. This one's altogether different. It's SCP-4182-EX. Object class explained. Level 1 classified. Not a big deal. Containment procedures indicate a Foundation-operated bot is to review the internal servers for references to Site 5. These files are to be isolated and reported to the on-duty server administrator for correction. And I will back up for just a minute because the lead into this was that this document received a recent revision. So now we were going back. Now we're going forward to the present day. So 4182 was a phenomenon by which internal Foundation documents were periodically altered to include references to a non-existent site, Site 5, initially attributed to an anomaly. This was later determined to have occurred because of an on-caught exception in int SCPFN's source code. As of 2019, this error has been patched. 4182 is now designated as explained. And if you weren't really paying attention, you might think that's it. And you'd go, hold on. We know what's going on. We know there's more to this. Something's being covered up. But if you scroll down just a little bit, you have a thing at the bottom. It says, you have one new message. You can click it. It says, from Jay Davis, our sysadmin. The subject reads, they're lying. The body reads, it's real. See you there. And there's a weird sort of smiley face at see you there. And in between it's real and see you there is a video. And the video is staticky. It's got it has an exploration log sort of feel of somebody descending stairs. There's static in the piece. It builds up more and more, and the static cuts out. And then for the last second or two, and by the way, you really need to go look at this because this is a very poor rendition of what's actually going on. But the last 2 seconds of this or so, and this is really like blink and you miss it sort of stuff, is a little snippet of a pile of skeletons in a dingy room in a very grainy, sepia tone looking cave. And it says, see you there. And that's where this article ends. I love the hell out of this piece. So here's Hippo has explained the work in full as to what they intended in the comments, if you want to be totally spoiled. My theory on it going in was not too far off the mark, which is that the Foundation keeps finding a site, and this Site 5 is something that they used to get up to. It was something they did back in the 80s, maybe a little bit earlier, and they were, whatever they did was so terrible and potentially so dangerous that they sealed it up, and they removed all remnants of its memory from the record, from the servers. And then we start working our way backwards. They dig it up again, and they see what they see, and they bury it again, and they try and bury it a little bit stronger, and a little bit more, and that gets you back to the very first revision, where we're finding it, where we were finding it again for the first time, for the first time all over again, and I love the piece. As we're finding it again, and the way that this story is told by, here's what happened last time. Oh, here's what happened the time before that. And you can tell, you have to think about it, kind of work your way backwards, but we keep trying to prevent ourselves from finding potentially this very dangerous site. Now, Hippo's interpretation of this differs slightly. It was that we did something very shameful at this site, so horrific that the anomaly actually comes from the sheer scope of how terrible we were. And the whole thing with melting brains is like, that's actually an effect of how bad the things we did were, is that you can't comprehend it. Like, it quite literally melts your brain just being around it. Now, there's references to radiation. This is in Japan. This was in, very tense times. There's certainly a lot of things you could that you could infer from what the work tells you. And plenty of things left up to the imagination, and that's a really overlooked part of this sometimes, is that sometimes the less you say, the better, because the reader will come up with their own conclusions, and they're normally scarier than anything you come up with yourself. This is, for its sheer production values, in particular this video at the end of it, just end to end, one of the best works I've seen this year. Very, very, very easy +1. I encourage you to go look this up, see it as Hippo went about setting it up, because every part of this is really polished. Oh, aside from that wrong HTTP error code. But that's, that's okay. I'll let it slide given how incredibly good the rest of this piece was. Very easy +1. Moving on. SCP-4877, titled 9.8 meters per second squared, written by Captain Kirby. 9.8 meters per second squared is, of course, the speed of gravitational acceleration on Earth. We have an image in this piece of what are, I'm informed by the subtitle to be cliffs in Ireland, which are a common location for 4877 occurrences. The procedures are interesting, that all individuals who demonstrate understanding of 4877 are to be questioned once all possible information regarding it has been extracted. They're to be amnestized and released. Any pictures, videos, or other media depicting or describing the skip are to be removed by Foundation web crawlers, and should individuals who have been linked, I should say, to 4877 disappear for longer than 7 days, a duplicate body is to be prepared in order to fake the individual's death under the cover story that they died after falling from a great height. Really strange. It really makes you wonder what they're setting up. So 4877 is described as a phenomenon which can reduce the force of gravity that is applied to an individual during free fall. The exact circumstances aren't fully understood, but we've got a set of bullet points that seem to be necessary. It can be triggered by anyone, but the individual must be in free fall, close their eyes, and be consciously attempting to trigger this phenomenon. We believe there are additional requirements physically and mentally that must be fulfilled before this is successful, but due to the lack of concrete resources regarding this phenomenon, we've been unable to actually determine what they are. We have our discovery log is a YouTube video that gained 30,000 views in under an hour. It was a black screen, and in the caption in the center it said, "Flight Classes Final Exam." There was a boy standing at the edge of a cliff in his late teens, long black hair, slim build. There are several young men and women on the edge of the camera frame talking. There's wind flapping against the microphone. You can't actually hear anything because the wind is so high up. There's a bald man in his mid-40s. He enters the frame. He's wearing a Hawaiian shirt and sweatpants. The man approaches. He places his hands on the boy's shoulders. The two exchange words that we can't hear because of the wind. This bald man smiles and pats the boy on the back and leaves. The camera pans over the edge of the cliff. Below are waves crashing against rocks that jut out of the water, and the camera pans back to the boy. He runs and jumps off the cliff, and he's impaled on the rocks. The camera pans back to the audience, gathered at the edge of the cliff. They're applauding. Their expressions are neutral. There's a black screen, and the caption reads, "Join One Leap today," and the video ends. I love this setup. He, jumps to his death. There's applause and neutral expressions from the gathered audience, and then join us today. You too could fall to your death. So YouTube took the video down for violating community guidelines. A researcher happened to make some connections. They noted that the fall from the video lasted almost a full second longer than it should have, given the speed of gravity, that they actually did reduce the force of gravity on themselves to some extent. Now, to the right of this text, we have a flyer And this is really cool looking. In the center, it says "good airwaves," and this is a phrase that gets used a ton in this piece. It was actually an alternate title for this, and for what my 2 cents are worth, I think it's the better title. It's the really distinct piece, the really distinct phrase in this piece. It's used as a mantra, a way of life, and I think it actually works better as a title for the piece than the 9.8 meters per second squared. But he tried it both ways. That's ultimately, Kirby's decision, but it doesn't stop me from having my own opinions. Anyway, this flyer has, it's really pretty. It's done in pastel colors, mostly yellow and purple. And there's some freaky sort of stuff in it. Positive vibrations, high divine radiation community, higher dioxylene levels are just one leap away. So I Googled dioxylene, thinking, well, maybe that's some chemical in the brain. Maybe it is, but if you Google it, it takes you right back to this skip. So it's something that they made up. They got me. So we go into an addendum where we were actually able to identify the boy in the video. The Irish law enforcement confirmed the boy did die during the incident. We also correctly identify the bald man in the video. His name, he goes by Rainbow. It was legally changed to Rainbow from Dennis Friedman in 1996. And this researcher, Lynn, volunteered to interview Rainbow under the guise of a civilian seeking to learn more about One Leap. Now, in this initial interview, Rainbow has 5 lines. He ends 4 of them with good airwaves. The gist of this is that he does sort of discreetly give researcher Lynn an address and a time, presumably to have the first meeting. And he's got this great personality in this. It's like the super laid back, hippie sort of thing. From how he's described as a bald man in a Hawaiian shirt and sweats, you're not envisioning a whole heck of a lot. But that's been the case in reality with cult leaders and all sorts of freaky sorts. For whatever reason, people follow him just the same. And he talks about these internal dioxylene receptors in this interview, but it does set up the first meeting. We go to a table of reports, and there are 9 of them, and they're each fairly lengthy, so I'm going to summarize them quite briefly. So she's at a meeting. It looks and feels like an AA meeting. Everybody's a little quiet, standoffish. They do introductions. She remembers her fake name, gives that, and also there's another new girl. Her name is Olivia. In the second report, we come to find this is treated kind of like a class, that to the point that a number of members call Rainbow Professor R. He talked for more or less an hour straight, giving messages on the little drawings on the whiteboard occasionally, and sometimes it was like a lecture, and sometimes it was like a sermon. Our researcher was the only one taking notes, but she wrote some quotes down, and these serve to give Rainbow some more character here. There's a couple of good ones in here. It says, "The internet, man, stay off the internet. All the little blinky lights on screen are out to get you. You used to be able to tell what's real and what's got no soul behind it, but not anymore. All I get are bad airwaves, man." And there's a few like this. And then we have more random ones. It says, "With the invention of Q learning and exploration strategies, we see a 300% decrease in the denying radiation the chatbot AIs give off. Can anyone tell me why?" Like, it's this strange, like, hippie talk, but then like stuff they should have absolutely no business understanding or even, knowing about. The third report sets up a final exam for a 60-year-old woman named Margaret. The fourth is an interview of sorts between researcher Lynn and Olivia Walsh, who was the other new person. The fifth one lays out the final exam, and researcher Lynn says that, she'd watched the video of the kid hitting the rocks 100 times just for her calculations, and she thought it would brace her for seeing it in person, but she was very naive in her calculations there. She hobbled to the cliff more than ran, and watching her fall just felt wrong. Not dreadful, just wrong. She didn't scream as she fell, and it felt like it took forever. And there's a good chance the woman fell for longer than the boy did in the video, probably around 15 seconds. It felt longer, and after she hit the ground, Rainbow declared that she received a C in the course, and that's when the applause started. And I can't express how I felt about the applause. Even Olivia clapped. I mean, I did too. I guess there was something respectable about it all. She went out on her own terms. That deserves some recognition, right? The sixth report, she's kind of surprised that nobody seems to be particularly fazed by this. Nobody appears to really acknowledge the fact that they all just saw an old woman die the other day. There's further quotes in here that, and you really need to read these just for the quotes from Rainbow, because he's a very entertaining character in this. So the seventh is also Lynn trying to understand how Olivia could be so calm by, watching an old woman die. And yet came back, and she said, well, you came back as well. And Olivia starts saying that everything is starting to kind of make sense, and says that she wants to fly. And Lynn says, what if you fall? And Olivia says, I won't. And on the eighth report, Rainbow announces that Olivia would be graduating earlier due to her excellent performance the past few days. She's taking the final exam this weekend. I know I shouldn't do anything. I'm not, but I don't know. She looked so happy. She knows she's going to jump to her death. Or, I don't know anymore. Maybe she flies. I hope she flies. Her life's been too short to end on the rocks at the bottom of that cliff. So much for these weekly coffees. And we have more quotes from Rainbow. And then in this ninth report, it begins with, she flew. I'm going to try and list in as much detail as possible everything that happened in case any of it contributes to triggering the phenomenon. 1. Olivia arrived with Rainbow wearing jeans and a white t-shirt. As though jeans and a white tee are pivotal to flight and defying gravity. 2. Everyone gathered around the cliff edge she was going to jump off of, just like last time. 3. She didn't act very different. The others all seemed excited and a little jumpy, but she was much calmer. 4. Olivia lined up and took her mark. 5. Rainbow began to chant one leap over and over. Everyone, myself included, joined in. 6. Olivia closed her eyes. 7. Olivia jumped off the cliff. 8. She didn't even fall. She simply went up. 9. Everyone standing back clapped. 10. Rainbow declared that Olivia passed with an A+ grade. I don't know where she is now. And we have a footnote that says, Foundation satellites and atmospheric imaging apparatus have not yet located the individual. I have this feeling she's going to be okay, though. I'm kind of happy for her. Now that I think about it a little more, I felt a certain updraft when she jumped. I wonder if those were the good airwaves that Rainbow talks about. So that's the reports, and this is actually most of the exposition of the story. We do have a bit more, and it's all very important stuff, but that set up a lot of the piece. But this third addendum indicates that following that last report, Lynn's mission was considered complete, and she was ordered to return to her post at Site 24. But after 12 hours without confirmation, Iota 10 was sent in to recover her. The apartment that was rented was found unoccupied with Lynn's belongings inside. We found a few materials on her computer. There was a file titled Rainbow Interview 2.mp3 that appeared to be recorded on a smartphone. And this is between Lynn and Rainbow. And she asked, I wanted to know, why do you let Olivia graduate early? And Rainbow says, feeling jumpy? She says, no, I don't want to rush it. I'm just curious. And Rainbow says, well, there's what you're looking for. Lynn goes, I'm not sure I understand. And he says, Olivia was a smart gal, got on quick, good airwaves. Lynn says, so there was something special about her. Rainbow says, special? No, who really is special? I don't think she's any more special than you are. Lynn says, are you saying I could graduate? Rainbow says, I don't know. I just give the grades. Do you think you can graduate? And there's a pause. Lynn says, I think I understand now. Thank you so much. And Rainbow again says, leap before you look, my gal. Good airwaves. So we go from this to 01103 underscore stream underscore v0491.mp4, which is a Foundation distributed field camera naming convention. Lynn had been given one such camera for the purpose of her mission, and this is her going by herself to one of these cliffs. She thinks she knows how to go about it. She doesn't know where she's got the conviction, but it's there, and she doesn't want to let it slip away from her. So she starts under her breath, one leap, one leap, one leap, one leap, and she jumps, flattens out, spreads her arms, and you can, she's flying. She's done it. And after 3 minutes of flying, she enters a cloud, and she says, can I open my eyes now? And estimates of Lynn's speed predict she should have left the cloud cover by this point, but the fog continues, and a light can be seen up ahead. And Lynn says, I can feel the updraft pushing me somewhere. I think I'm flying, but I don't want to look. And a silhouette can be seen against the light, but its features cannot be distinguished. And it says, Catherine, is that you? And that was Lynn's undercover name for this. She replies, Olivia, I'm sorry, I can't tell what's there. I haven't opened my eyes yet. She said, it's okay, no need to apologize. Good airwaves. And Lynn replies, good airwaves. The figure extends its hand. Says, reach out and grab my hand, I'll pull you up. Lynn says, got it. So Lynn reaches out her hand towards the figures. The figure grabs on and appears to pull Lynn so they're facing each other. But due to the light behind the figure, no features can be distinguished. Lynn says, your hand feels cold, are you okay? Walsh says, I'm vibing out. Looks like you found your wings. Lynn says, yeah, I have. Still having a hard time wrapping my head around it. And Walsh says, well, you're here now, my gal. And Lynn releases the figure's hand and they both hover. And Lynn says, you're doing that thing where you sound like Rainbow again. Walsh says, oh, right. I guess he's just rubbed off on me. Lynn says, I have so much I want to say. I can't believe you're here as well. I was worried it'd just be me in the clouds. And Walsh says, well, this is the way it turned out. Lynn says, it's almost like a dream. I never want to wake up. We can even follow through on our weekly coffees. Walsh says, coffees? Says, yeah, we said we were going to try to meet up once a week to just talk. And Olivia says, oh, right, sorry. Just slipped my mind. Lynn says, you are Olivia, right? And Olivia says, do you not believe me? Lynn opens her eyes and says, you don't look like Olivia. And the transcript ends. Researcher Lynn's body was found impaled upon the rocks at the bottom of the Moor Cliffs. Attempts to locate Rainbow or any other members mentioned in Lynn's previous report have been unsuccessful. Containment of all individuals associated with One Leap is considered a level 4 priority. End article. Man, this ending sneaks up and then just punches you in the gut. I really love the whole arc of this thing, honestly. So, first off, Kirby has kind of struck lightning in a bottle here with Rainbow. I absolutely love this character. It's a very vibrant personality. I don't think overall we've done enough with really charismatic cult leaders. They're a super creepy fucking thing, and they don't have enough of a presence on the wiki. I really, really dig this character, and I want to kind of see what he gets up to next, because, you know, I could also see this being the sort of thing where he has to go to ground and pop up somewhere else, but he can't really hide this personality and has to, that comes through as he, finds some new endeavor. Or maybe he doesn't. Maybe it's like, it's just this huge cult of personality thing where, he gets everybody saying good airwaves and buying into the way that he is. We leave a lot unsaid on Rainbow's motivations here, and I think that's awesome. The ending where the Lynn reaches out, the hand's super cold. It knows researcher Lynn and sounds like somebody she knows, but doesn't actually know enough to be convincing. And then you don't look like her, end transcript, and we found her dead body on the rocks. Just an awesome final arc to this. Now here's an issue I have, and that is that both of these files, the interview and the stream, the video, were found on her computer after she died, presumably. So how does that happen? And for their part, Kirby acknowledges this and basically says that it's an exercise left to the reader. There is an answer. I don't know what it is. And to be honest, any mechanics by which that would happen, I think, might make me just sort of go, okay, if that's what you say. At the same time, I don't really know how you would get this this ending without that convention. So I don't know. It's still really, really good. And this is allegedly left as an exercise to the reader. Maybe. But that said, that's a minor nitpick, and honestly, it's not even really a nitpick. If that's what they intended to do, then it's what they intended to do. And just an awesome piece, and I'm hoping this is the start of something special with Rainbow. This is one of my favorite characters of the year. Like, this has actually been a fantastic week for notable skips, for big personalities, and big punches to the gut as far as pieces. Awesome work, very easy, +1. Moving on, SCP-4165, titled "Well, at least the idea has legs," by Alan Darris. And I have it on good authority from Alan himself. You can say Alan Darris or Alan Darris. They're both fine. In fact, they don't pronounce it much themselves, so do your thing. We have no particularly fancy formatting in this work, no images to be found anywhere in an object class of Euclid. Procedures that indicate the skip is to be contained in standard humanoid containment cell with a hermetic airlock door, equipped with an AC system and 4 extraction vents with remote activation. All mechanical parts are inspected weekly. In the case of -1 manifesting, it's to be let into the airlocked, after which either an air conditioning system or extraction vents are to be used, depending on which physical state -1 is in. So apparently we have this -1 that we have to deal with by way of a man trap, an airlock. So 4165 is also to meet with the site psychiatrist once every 2 weeks, and a report is to be compiled after each visit of its mental condition. So 4165 is described as a 28-year-old white human male, remarkably underweight, with various minor health problems, specifically insomnia and persistent malaise. Psychological testing shows the skip possesses a primarily melancholic personality and suffers from generalized anxiety disorder, as well as obsessive compulsive personality disorder. We have a footnote here that says this is believed to be partially caused by the -1, which is described as a vaguely humanoid entity that is constantly chasing 4165. The entity is composed entirely of black ink and has shown the ability to change its shape, size, and physical state at will. We have some notes here of it's affected by physical factors like ordinary ink, like freezing, but does not evaporate. This is one of these where we're answering questions that weren't asked prematurely, and this actually does not come up again in the work. The thing with -1, it will manifest about 50 meters from this 28-year-old and start to move towards it. It will avoid obstacles with the use of its polymorphic capabilities. If not provoked, -1 shows no interest in any other individuals and will ignore them. But if it's attacked or otherwise provoked, it will become aggressive, typically by solidifying parts of... Now, here's the thing. It says primarily by solidifying parts of 4165's body. I believe this meant to be -1. I've had 2 of those this week where we meant to say -1, but it's actually in the work it says the skip's proper. What it'll basically do is pour its own ink, -1 ink, into the individual's nasal and oral cavities, presumably going into the lungs and killing them. And if immobilized or significantly harmed, -1 will demanifest and manifest again after 7 to 10 days. Typically, it does not make attempts to communicate or respond to such attempts. We've only had 1 exception recorded during an incident in 2018 when -1 manifested during a containment breach of a different skip that had managed to basically break down the functionality of various containment chambers, including our skip here. -1 was able to freely enter the containment chamber. It was approaching the guy. The guy seemed distressed. He was moving around the chamber, trying to find a way to get out. He hid in the corner, covered his head. -1 approaches the subject, and a large vertical cavity forms on the entity's head. Black ink starts to flow out of it in large quantities, and after about 2 minutes, a book and a pencil start to emerge from it, with visible difficulties. It pulls the items from the cavity, opens the book in front of the subject, and forcibly puts the pencil into his hand. The man examines the book and experienced visible emotional distress before throwing it away along with the pencil. -1 kept trying to forcefully give the items back to it while producing incoherent vocalizations and hitting the subject in the face with one of its limbs. Eventually knocks the guy out and just keeps wailing on him, beating the shit out of him until security officers come and take -1 away. It was drawn out of the chamber and immobilized shortly after, making it demanifest. 4165 was severely injured, is currently recovering in its containment chamber under the surveillance of Site Medical. The only attempt to interview him regarding the incident resulted in a panic attack, making it impossible to acquire any information. Future interviews are postponed until he recovers. The items brought by -1 were retrieved shortly after the incident. They were identified as an ordinary black pencil and a notebook signed by our man, 4165. Almost all pages of the notebook, including the cover, are completely covered by ink, making the contents indecipherable. The only 2 inscriptions left visible are found on the first and third pages, reading Ideas and Chapter 1, respectively. End article. So, I like this piece. What we've got here is basically, this is sort of the manifestation of an unwritten story that's very frustrated with the author and quite literally coming to life and beating the shit out of him and getting him in an attempt to have him write the story. We don't specify a lot of backstory here on how we came to find any of this. Is it necessary? No. But by itself, the work is it's missing a little bit to give it any sort of real gravitas. And that is, that may partially explain the low-ish rating on this. It's at +28 at the time of this recording. I'm sorry, 29 with my +1. And it's fine. I feel like if you want to make it more, you could. But for what it is, which is just sort of a short story, a little a little tale, maybe looking in the mirror and seeing, God damn, I like, how can I only have a line that says ideas and a line that says chapter 1? I get it. I think most authors and really any creator can sit and have that moment of writer's block or whatever your equivalent is, where you sit down and you're like, I'm going to create now, and sometimes it just doesn't matter how bad you want to, it's not going to happen. So I mean, the work is not putting a man on the moon, but it's not bad. This is a nice little piece and worth a +1 from me. Now, before we get into the last work of the recap show, I want to briefly discuss our long boy of the week. This is SCP-4431, titled Bleeding Beneath Antarctica by Nat Voltaic. That sounds like a new name. That is 9volt. 9volt has changed their wiki name to Nat Voltaic. I have covered a lot of Nat's works on Cafe. Always recommend taking a look at the episode reference on scp.cafe, and it's totally sortable. You can click the headers and sort any way you want, and look them up by author. I have not yet updated those names. I will do so tonight or tomorrow. The skip deals with some massive subterranean things found in Antarctica. And the majority of the narrative is done through old journal excerpts from Dayton Bannard and a set of journals that start in 1919 and tell a really tremendous story and a really fantastical thing that would be equal parts, scary and intriguing and altogether fascinating, and all set, in the most desolate place on the planet of them trying to. This is actually as part of an expedition. They're not trying to find anomalies. They're trying to make it to the South Pole. Following in the footsteps of Amundsen and the great explorers of the era. Really beautiful imagery, really fascinating entities throughout this piece. A lot of questions left unanswered, but enough to just leave you really wanting to know more and more about what you're reading. Really, really tremendous piece, but quite long. So a little more than I want to get into this week, but tremendous work. Another favorite, like I said, awesome week. Don't let the length put you off. It's a tremendous story. SCP-4431. Now, last but not least, we have a rare Series 1 rewrite. You don't see these every day. This is SCP-378, titled Brainworm, by Uranium Empire. What's really interesting to me with this is when you do these Series 1 rewrites, that normally deals with a work that over time, as the site standards have changed and, sort of the bar keeps rising, these borderline works, some of them don't get a pass. It's like, well, I know we've got rose-colored glasses and all that, but this still doesn't do it for me, and they end up in deletion threshold. And rather than just wiping them off the map completely, which is totally within our purview, we do. People can try to rewrite the work, and we like to do that. Tell sort of a retelling of the same story, but just do it a little bit better. And that is the case with this piece. The other interesting thing to me with this, and this might be the first time, I'm not sure, this is a Series 1 skip with an object class of Thaumiel. I dig that. This sort of messes with the continuity of things a little bit from somebody that's been around for a while. But if you haven't been around for a while, I think this is actually a good thing, that we're getting those little weaving of modern conventions into older works. We have a header at the top from Ryza that says, following the implementation of the Kraken protocol on June 27, 1963, containment procedures for 378 have been updated. Personnel assigned to the 378 project are to review its updated documentation as soon as possible. So the thing basically exists to tell you that there is a Kraken protocol. The procedures are quite lengthy, actually. They're about 6 paragraphs. So we are taking a lot of time in explaining how to contain all of the different components of 378, because it's not just a single entity. Now, the skip itself, 378, is to be contained in a subterranean entity containment terrarium. Temperature and humidity are to be maintained at levels optimal for the growth and habitation of Heterodermia cane crow and Prenolepis everett man. I love the two names. Little nod to Cane Pathos Crow and our own Dr. Mann. Two site legends given a little nod in this work. I dig that, especially given the Series 1 age of this now. Twice per year, 378 is to undergo a medical and psychological examination. So that's interesting. It's a terrarium, and it's got humidity and such set to be the optimal way to grow cave lichen and ants, but it's also to undergo psychological exams. So we're setting up something interesting here. Furthermore, access to its containment terrarium is separated from the surrounding facility by a decontamination chamber. Personnel handling it are to wear full body protection and must be screened for -A prior to exiting decontamination. Infected personnel are to be terminated unless the position of -1 or -3 is vacant, in which case they are to be assigned to the relevant position instead. So that's very confusing on first read because we're not really setting anything up. Like we don't know what that means. The position of -1 is vacant. -1, like normally you don't like apply and get hired into the position of being a -1 or a -3, but it looks like you do here, and that's not too terribly far off the mark actually. So what happens is, thanks to this Kraken protocol, we now focus containment on maintaining its three primary containment components, -1, -2, -3. So presently, -1 is housed in the Area 19 barracks. -1 is employed as a maintenance tech with a security clearance of 0/A19, so a very low level security technician. Upon the death of the current -1, brain dead or comatose reserve personnel may be elected to replace it. And I'm sorry, I was laughing about that particular sentence in the cafe chat with Uranium Empire because I don't think it was intended, but the visual that gives me is like a bunch of brain dead comatose people like in a mock debate over who should be elected to -1, and there's a moderator and they're asking questions on how they would deal with the skip, and all the questions are met with silence and then just, I see, thank you for your time, sir. So I don't know, it's fucked up, but that's just me. Anyway, this -1 is important, and it's important they be a brain dead or comatose person because it's the primary means of communication with 378. So care must also be maintained to keep -1's vocal functions in working order. So presumably that means that the -1 is the mouthpiece for this thing. So we don't want to give it a dead body or, damn near a dead body and have it have all fucked up vocal cords where we can't understand it. So -2 currently takes the form of David Lockheed, a 36-year-old Caucasian male in the employ of the American Supernatural Containment Initiative, the ASCI. This is a GOI that hasn't gotten a lot of love, but they do exist, here and there. And this, to maintain the continued operations of the Foundation in the U.S., -2 has been tasked with sabotaging ASC operations against the Foundation, as well as collecting info in the Foundation's interest. So we have -2 appears to be something of a double agent. They work for us, but are employed by the ASCI. -2 is expected to follow a strict health and exercise regimen. This actually says regiment, which is a different thing. That's the military thing, not the exercise plan, due to the inherent difficulty in replacing -2. So we have friends in high places thanks to this -2. And -3 currently takes the form of Lisa Martin, a 33-year-old Mexican-American female employee at the Spicy Crust Pizza in Staten Island. In the event of -3's death, it must be replaced as soon as possible. So these three components are all humans, and they're considered components of the skip. That's also interesting. So we go from here to the description, where we finally find out what 378 is. It's an arthropod. It looks like a great big Amazon giant centipede. With largely vestigial legs, it measures 3 meters fully from mouth to anus, with a body thickness of 1 meter around and a weight of 233 kilograms. That's right around 500 pounds for those of you keeping score at home. That's a big bug. And under normal conditions, it is an omnivore with a diet consisting primarily of lichen and insects. So that is our callback to the initial procedures. We are, it's in a terrarium, and we are maintaining temperature and humidity at levels optimal for this growth of lichen and these North American cave ants. So we are basically providing food for it. That also is a callback to the Thaumiel object class. We're doing everything we can to make this thing happy and give it what it needs. So it is capable of asexual reproduction. It will produce instances of -A. They look like the skip, but it's smaller. And when we dissect these -A centipedes, we find that it is a superficial resemblance at best, because it is totally lacking organ systems. All that's really in it is a primitive neural network. So we've determined that these -A instances are remotely controlled by 378, by our big bug. They're obligate endoparasites. I like that word. It's totally scientific. They need to become a parasite within something, in this case humans, and I like this passage, infecting advanced primates such as humans, Homo ignatus, and we have a link here to SCP-655 and a footnote that reads data expunged, as well as Gigantopithecus sapiens, which is a link to SCP-1000 and a footnote that reads common Sasquatch. So these can infect us, Sasquatch, all the advanced primates. So in doing so, it integrates itself with the host's nervous system through poorly understood means. It will induce brain death in the host and extend the skip's remote control to the host itself without affecting vital functions or sensory input. So what it will do after this, once it's got the host infected, the skip, the big bug, attempts to reintegrate its hosts into their respective social sphere, into their normal way of life. It will direct its hosts to indefinitely engage in behaviors typical for its species, such as communal labor and social recreation. Human hosts prefer environments with a high population density and a robust entertainment scene. We don't know how many of these hosts the skip can maintain at any one time. We interrogated this bug, and it confessed to the existence of 26 human hosts, as well as 2 instances of Alouata pigra, which is the Guatemalan black howler, and 3 instances of SCP-1000, of which it noted it had been acquired during a period of heavy intoxication. So it takes over these people, and then through remote control sort of lives their life. Like, it just makes them do stuff. Like, I'm going to go work a job. I'm going to go to the movies. Because it's a big fucking bug. It can't do it itself. I actually really dig this. So we go into an addendum, a psychological evaluation of SCP-378 conducted by Dr. Jacob Bright. This evaluation establishes a few things, notably that 378 is self-aware and quite intelligent. It has a complex relationship to its hosts. It maintains a common sense of identity across all of them, but each is treated as a persona for 378 to roleplay with. Hosts don't interact with 378 itself or other hosts, suggesting that it is utilizing its anomalous abilities for entertainment. It's further suggested by the skip's readiness to abandon such personas under duress. So the behavior is largely unique to each instance. They're all relatively extroverts. They don't normally isolate themselves aside from sleeping, going to the bathroom, that sort of stuff. And the bug appears to take equal enthusiasm in stressful versus pleasant situations. So the bug is particularly attached to the identity of Lisa Martin. In contrast to other hosts, Lisa Martin's weekly routine is quite static, and it gives her schedule on what she does during the week, on weekends, and in the event of Miss Martin's death, 378 will direct another host to assume her identity. Attempts to interrupt Miss Martin's routine have been unilaterally met with unusual level of hostility from 378 and its hosts. So we go from this to an email, and again, we're kind of nodding to our past here, from D. Hayden at SkipNet, and this is to a site director, and this is in response to identifying current hosts. So basically recapping what we've just found, we've revealed quite a bit about 378, but we don't believe it understands the significance of social dynamics, particularly in regards to hierarchy and social capital, because several of its identities hold surprising positions of power. Two of them are beyond reach of the Foundation's current capacity to contain, and despite this, the skip's shown a willingness to sacrifice such hosts in order to defend, replace, or otherwise maintain Lisa Martin, this girl that just kind of works at a pizza place. This is odd, yes, but useful enough. It'd be a shame if something were to happen to Miss Spartan and her friends, would it not? And we have our line, SCP-378 is sapient, but it by no means understands the significance of its actions. With a little bit of persuasion, David Lockheed might yet ascend from petty paper pusher for the ASCI, right where the Foundation most needs a puppet. And if I'm not mistaken, Spicy Crust Pizza could always do with a second franchise. So we have a proposal. This is an 05 council vote, employing SCP-378's anomalous abilities to defend Foundation operations in the United States. And with 9 in favor, 3 against, and 1 abstention, it is approved. The Kraken Protocol has been initiated. So we come lastly to another email. It says, delays in the Gamma U2677 project. It says, so good news and bad news. The good news, as I'm sure you've already heard, Site 56 construction has begun, all thanks to a certain Mr. Lockheed. So the Kraken Protocol is being expanded. This is a perfect opportunity to expand the scope of SCP-1000's containment while assuring the ASCI doesn't suck the Lily of the Valley Nexus dry before we get to it. And for all its oddities, 378 is delighted at the prospect of having a change in scenery. We can't imagine a tropical centipede grub enjoying a sphere of influence limited to New England, but that's beside the point. Its Dash-A was quite compliant on the way there, which leads us to the bad news. Rupert Tremont is a fun little guy. He's an agent for the FBI's unofficial Unusual Incidents Unit. So this is before the UIU becomes a proper GOI. And all too stupid to trust Agent Ryans with his drink while he went to the restroom. After that, it's a matter of transport back to Provisional Area 56 in Black Rock and a centipede down the gullet. Problem comes up when 378 tells us it can't establish a connection. Now, Tremont's still alive, so that's not normal. We run a number of tests, try to figure out what's wrong, and that's when we see a different centipede in his head where our centipede usually goes. More to come, but I have a bad feeling about this. End article. So, I didn't see this end coming, to the point that I went, ooh, that's really good. I really like this. So some of my favorite things about this piece, this feels like a Series 1 piece. We've got all the nods to, people of the past. This has all of the trappings of something from, this 10 years ago would have been an absolutely tremendous work. It'd be one of the best works on the wiki. And this walks the line very nicely of having modern trappings, but feeling not at all out of place in Series 1. And I say that in the best terms I can muster. It's not uncommon anymore for Series 1 to be a totally negative connotation. But with these rewrites, we do have an opportunity to sort of defy that notion that, they were, didn't have the worst idea ever when the original 378 was out there. And we're basically taking the original idea and adding a little twist to it. What if 378 just really liked being a human and doing human shit? And that's where we get this. And from that one little twist, from the one little change of premise, this becomes a much better work. And, Uranium Empire, very, very talented author. I like I said, I love having the Thaumiel object class in this, and all of a sudden we've got this sort of anachronistic skip that, you ask anyone that's been around the site, Thaumiel doesn't exist before SCP-2000. Well, it does now, and it's SCP-378, and it's very good, and that was a very easy +1 from me. And that's it. I got some mailbag questions for you. Well, I guess for me. From you to me. Hopefully with love. Crashington asks, what's your favorite horror film /book /game /series /etc.? What do you like about it? And It's funny, outside of the wiki, I actually don't do a lot of horror at all. Um, it had only occasionally even piqued my interest. Um, my my fascination with the wiki, it wasn't because it was horror writing, it was because it was a very challenging community to write for. So I have actually no real love of the horror genre. Um, my favorite book out of what little I've honestly read, and I'll be honest, is it is a Stephen King book. It's From a Buick 8, and universally, it's not as highly received as some of his other stuff, but it was the first one of his I read, and the reason that I really dig it is because it was the first thing that I'd seen that doesn't try to answer a lot of questions. Where did these things come from? Why are they hostile? What do they want? And sometimes your curiosity is just altogether dangerous, and you're not going to get the answers, and they're not going to make any sense if you had them. And it was my first exposure to that sort of concept, and it's something that we do see occasionally on the wiki, but maybe not as much as would make sense for the sort of shit that the Foundation actually gets up to. In not everything's going to make sense. Far too often, we do wrap everything up with a nice, understandable sort of conclusion, and maybe that's to our detriment. Maybe we should do more of challenging the notion that everything is explicable, because by the nature of what we do, a lot of the stuff should be totally inexplicable. Christian Wright asks, what concepts, ideas, or tropes would you like to see explored more on the wiki, and which ones are currently overused? So, I think I've said this a few times. The thing I'd like to see explored more is the gray areas of the Foundation, questions of ethics, questions that challenge cold, not cruel. I think for the most part, we have, in recent times, developed a very benevolent Foundation. And the number of times where the Foundation is the good guys versus the bad guys is, I would say, like 90-10 in favor of them being the good guys. And I would love to see more stuff where the Foundation are doing, their methods and their motives make you really question whether these guys are worthy of the support at all. Like, are what, and maybe not the whole Foundation, but this particular site, this particular director has too much power, and they're, abusing it. And this is the sort of thing you would find in an organization this size. One person can be a total tyrant and a total asshole and really have way too much power and cause way too much damage for a really long time before anybody in a position of power to do something about it notices. And that's the sort of thing that can really up the punch of a work that, maybe there was a bad situation and it became made worse by the Foundation. And this is something that was actually in the deep dive that I did on SCP-4504. That was a very pivotal part of it, that the Foundation was making a bad situation worse through whatever you want to call it, malicious ignorance, just really not caring about the well-being of a person. That's the sort of stuff I think is really powerful, and a lot of people can really would really be uncomfortable with it, and challenging the reader in that way is something that I really dig. And AIS Mallard asks, what kind of bad technology do you see in skips that you wish people could magically learn not to do? That's difficult, because I'm fully aware that I, am more of a nerd than most when it comes to computers. So I do try to go back and give people some leeway when they get into computing skips, because it's not obvious or intuitive how a lot of this stuff works. If I had to pick one thing in general, it would be sort of the overall concept of anomalous software and the sort of things that could actually happen. If you boil any sort of program down, and that includes literally any platform that you're listening to my voice on right now, at the end of the day, everything you do, let's say on on Windows, on your home PC. Your browsing of the web, your writing of a skip, your listening to music, it all boils down to a very small handful of instructions. And these are very, very primitive operations. And if the computer is given an instruction it doesn't know what to do anything with, it's not going to do anything at all. And a lot of the time we'll have, this explanation that like, well, it's an anomalous virus and it does this and this, but, without the instructions to back it and to make it work, that would never happen. So at a basic, understanding, and I say basic, and that's not the right word. What I mean is like at a fundamental primitive level of how computing works, it doesn't work that way. And that's a difficult thing to have to accommodate when you're trying to do a computery sort of skip, which honestly, that's why I avoid them. It's hard to make that work. Now, AIS Mallard and I are actually sort of workshopping an idea that is anomalous in a way that still works in conjunction with modern computing. And it is, I think we're getting somewhere. We got a little time to hammer it out before CollabCon is all said and done, and we'll see how it goes. But for the most part, I honestly, I try not to bash people too bad for bad computer skips. And I'll tell people at the end of the day, my vote is just worth one. If it tells the story you want to tell, I'll get over my gripes with the computers one day. And that's all I got. We are on track for week 25, June 21st. Big thank you again to Moderator for the track Space Vandals off the album The World Within. Moderator.bandcamp.com. And if you thought this show was worth $1, always appreciate your support at patreon.com/scpcafe. I'll see you guys week 25, and until then, keep reading, keep writing, and I'll see you on the other side.